University. I accord a very warm welcome to everyone. And my name is Meenu Chopra. I am an educationist and a compassionate mentor for my students. It has been observed that when schools integrate the arts across the curriculum, the effectiveness of institutions, just a minute. I'm sorry, there's a slight glitch at my end. It has been observed that when schools integrate the arts across the curriculum, the effectiveness of instruction and teachers' ability to meet the needs of all students, learning a musical instrument, creating a painting, learning to dance, or singing in chorus teaches that taking small steps, practicing to improve, being persistent, and being patient are important for children's growth and improvement. It is inarguably true that aesthetic learning is its own reward. For today's session, we have eminent personalities from the field of creative arts as panelists who will discuss the impact of arts education in fostering a positive culture and climate of learning in schools. Our first panelist is Padam Shri awardee Ms. Pratibha Pralad, a highly respected performer, choreographer, author, scholar, arts administrator, and guru. With indefatigable energy and passion, Ms. Pratibha Pralad has pioneered India's most prestigious Delhi International Arts Festival. Her innovating efforts in creating India's signature arts festival has given a new dimension to India's cultural footprints globally. A renowned culture specialist, she is a frequent invitee to international conferences. Ms. Pratibha Pralad heads the Prasidh Foundation and Forum for Arts Beyond Borders, both of which she has established into premier cultural organizations of the country. Prasidh Dance Repertory, of which she is the artistic director, is frequently invited by international festivals for performances. As an educationist, Ms. Pralad is of the view that culture is the wealth you pass on to future generations. Our culture is our identity. It is the only unifying force in this divisive world. It is therefore our collective responsibility to invest in the culture. And these words summarize her commitment in designing the syllabus and teaching methodology for cultural studies for dance for NCERT and designing the question paper for class 10 and 12 boards. She has also contributed to MHRD's e-Pathshala program of procuring master's degree through online learning in 2015 and 16. The government of India has honored her with the Padam Shri in recognition of her human service to the arts. She is the youngest recipient of Central Sangeet Natak Academy Award for Dance in 2001. She's also received the Karnataka State Government Award 2001, Karnataka Kalashri 1997, and the list is endless. She has been honored with my special stamp by the Indian Postal Department for her service to the art and culture sector. We are deeply honored to have you here. A very warm welcome to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Our second panelist is Ms. Bidisha Roy Das. She is an entrepreneur. She is an experienced executive director with a demonstrated history of working in the education management industry, skilled in broadcasting, strategic planning, film editing, and journalism. She's a business development professional. Ms. Bidisha Roy Das is the founder of Anjuman, an organization that focuses on developing leadership through art, and that also emphasizes on developing 21st century skills and capacities of children and young adults. Artists, art educators, and managers have come together to provide high quality arts education in formal and non-formal learning spaces. Ms. Vidisha is the founder of Footprint Film Festival. The festival is an occasion to witness the work of young filmmakers to discover new tendencies and new audiovisual languages. The festival also creates an opportunity for meaningful exchanges between young filmmakers to stimulate co-production and enhance their understanding of various themes connected to the festival. Ms. Vidisha has been an art education consultant for private and public school systems in India. She's been an independent filmmaker for over 15 years. Ms. Vidisha is a trained singer in Hindustani classical music and performs in India and overseas. We are extremely delighted to have you amidst us, ma'am. Welcome.
Namaskar, and thank you for such a wonderful introduction. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Our next panelist is Mrs. Devyani Kapoor. Ms. Kapoor is an educationist, an author, and a thought leader. She is the founder and CEO of EduDevs, the School of Inspired Teaching and Learning. An ex-principal, she carries over 30 years of experience with her in the education sector and has worked with key brands in the educational industry. She is credited with introduction of a number of innovative pedagogical techniques for effective classroom management, quality circle time, lesson planning, experiential learning, and student empowerment techniques. A very warm welcome to you, ma'am. We have Brother Maheshwara Chaitanya ji as the moderator with us. He is currently serving as the chairman of the undergraduate admissions of the School of Engineering, Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham, Deputy Controller of Examinations of Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham, Amrita Puri campus, and also serves as the Contest Director, International Collegiate Programming of Contest, Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham for the past 10 years. He has more than 14 years of teaching experience in the field of computer science and engineering. We are extremely honored by your presence, Maheshwara ji. Extend a very warm welcome to you. And now I hand over the stage to you, Maheshwara ji.
Thank you, Meenu ma'am, and let me welcome all the panelists today, the attendees here. This is going to be a totally different kind of panel discussion because I am totally into technology and the other side is fully arts. But we both migrate at one point, that is the education. One of the important things what we have been witnessing in the recent time, maybe for the past 1 year, is the revolutionary NEP, the new education policy. And it is expected to bring so many changes, revolutionary changes, which will certainly help these children, not only in their schooling, but also in their shaping their future. So let me bring in a small, let me inject technology. Art is something which will allow us to open certain, sections of the brain. That is my belief. Because it will certainly open up the immense potential inside us. And I'm sure that Pratibha ma'am will accept or believe in such a kind of concept. And what I read in ma'am's website is ma'am speaks and writes from the heart. That is what I saw in the website, and I'm sure that ma'am can certainly impart that culture or that feel to the children, the youngsters, the younger generation as an educator. And definitely we are looking forward, maybe in the years to come, a blended approach in teaching and learning process. And today's crux of the important topic, today's panel discussion is blending the art and education. Because we are totally cluttered, getting cluttered in technology, but certainly arts can definitely help. There is no doubt about that. And that is the only way in which we can open up several horizons in shaping our life, in our own attitude, of course, to uplift the society from different dimensions. That is my feel, what I have been observing. And as from our own university philosophy and point of view, believe in arts, and somewhere we have to merge that with technology, education, and science. And let us start with a small question to all of you. Let me start with Pratibha ma'am. And ma'am, what do you think that the role of the educators, or how can an educator bring art into classroom, and how can we made it much more effective in the teaching learning process? Because we see that there is rote learning. And do you think that arts can create such a kind of change in terms of teaching as well as learning process?
Namaskar, and thank you so much for this invitation to be here. And Devyani Kapoor, I thank you and I congratulate you on this initiative of decoding the NEP. And I think it's very important that all of us understand what NEP is, the new NEP, the National Education Policy. Chaitanya ji, thank you so much for your kind words. And Bidisha, it's always a pleasure to see you. So thank you. Well, what I want to say is that the purpose of education is to develop good human beings, right? Who have rational thought, who have compassion, who have empathy, who have critical thinking, who have lateral thinking, and who are emotional beings. I mean, while they respond to a situation with a scientific temper, they do not have, emotionless or they're not devoid of emotions. They're supposed to, also have an emotional quotient to their scientific temper and their, logical and rational responses to situations. So these are the kind of people that we want, or we think will contribute to a good society. And the purpose of any education is to produce good citizens, good human beings, and good, people who can in turn form a good society, a good community, a good society, and a good country. And I think that is how the idea of education came about. But what happened to us in the last 70 years is that we started believing that education meant being excellent in one particular subject or in one particular department. For example, Chaitanya ji, forgive me for saying so. While you were talking just now, you said we would like to know, how we can correlate art with education, with technology, and with science. So there's no question of correlating it because, art is education, right? There's no correlating art with education. Art is education because art makes you a human being, like a complete human being who can have a certain, amount of resilience, which you want your students to have. Like I said, a physical discipline, which art gives, everybody a discipline, physical, mental discipline and strength of being, a purpose in life, which is most important because most often when we see mental health issues, we see children who are purposeless or young adults who are purposeless, who don't know what to do. But art always gives a person a sense of purpose. Art gives a person a sense of being who or she is in that particular sphere. You may not be the best, dancer in the world. You may not be the best musician in the world. You may not be the best painter in the world. But still, the joy of the process is what, makes you happy. And that process, the joy of learning, the joy of being in the process of making art, any art, whether it be dance, music, filmmaking, literature, poetry, painting. I mean, I'm not, making distinctions between different art forms. The process itself has to be enjoyed because we know, Chaitanya ji, that our philosophy says that the process is more important than the outcome.
Exactly, exactly.
We talk about karma,
Yeah.
akarma theory, and we say the process is more important. The outcome is not that important. You enjoy the process, and what God wills will be the outcome.
Yeah, yeah.
What has happened to our education system over the years is that the process has become most unenjoyable because the process is competitive. The process is about getting half a mark more than your peer, the other student, or getting something, quarter mark more, getting 99.9999%, getting 100%. I mean, that's a very, very, very bad trajectory, a very bad, place to be in. Because if a person gets 75% and does not get 99.9999%, let's say in one of your engineering subjects, in physics, chemistry, in mathematics, and the person starts believing that he or she is useless, that they don't have any other talent, that they can't contribute to society, that their whole life is over, that they can't, that they can't come up in life. So we have to make this distinction right in the beginning, and that is, I think, why the new education policy is important. We have to make a distinction between what you learn to earn a livelihood, which is a skill. So whether you're learning maths, you're learning computer science, you're learning some programming in computer science, whether you're learning biology, you're learning biotechnology, you're learning physics, or you're learning any of these subjects that's going to take you towards a goal of being able to earn something, you are just learning a skill. You're not Ramanujan to enjoy the whole idea of mathematics. I mean,
Yeah.
if you can become Srinivasan Ramanujan, yeah, fantastic. But how many of them become that? They are learning a particular subject towards a particular cause. If I study mathematics, computer science, and physics or whatever, I get into IIT. And if I get into IIT, then some business house will come and pick me up. I get a job. And then if I get a job and if I do very well in my subjects, I can ask for a very good remuneration. I mean, my
Yes.
emoluments, my annual emoluments is going to go up. It'll become a crore plus. So I get
Yes.
a crore plus, a fellow student who's maybe equally intelligent, but gets less marks, because he doesn't fare well in that particular examination, will get an emolument of 80 lakhs maybe annually. Another person may be equally intelligent, equally, worthy, but does not get enough marks for whatever reason, gets a 50 lakh emolument. Now you're already dividing society. You're already dividing society into 1 crore, 80 lakhs, 60 lakhs, and 50 lakhs. And you're attaching a value on that particular human being. So
Correct.
where is the value on education? In this whole process, where is the value on development of a holistic personality?
Yes.
Or development of a person who is integrated
Yes.
in
Yes.
life, in
Yes.
thought, in action, a person who's self-confident, a person who thinks that he or she is worthy, is a worthy human being, that doesn't depend on somebody else to tell them how worthy they are,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
So that is why I think, arts, that's where arts come in. Because arts, I must also, confess while I'm talking about arts, that not all artists are equal. Artists and arts is the same game right now as, what I'm talking about, education and skill management. Because most, dance teachers or music teachers or whatever, they're also earning a livelihood teaching something. They're teaching the physicality of the movement. They may be teaching how to modulate your voice and to sing something, but they aren't teaching you love for that discipline.
Yeah.
The students who come to the same dancer or musician or singer or whatever, painter, is also coming because they think that they can become you.
Yes.
That they
Yes.
can become, they don't understand the struggle, the amount of, sacrifice, the hard work, the perspiration that has gone behind this, the creation of this personality. Like they say that success is 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration. And
Yes.
that's also true of the arts. That's also true of the arts. So when we talk about an artist as an educator, I don't think all can be even bracketed as artists. All singers, dancers, filmmakers, writers, poets cannot be artists. They're singers, dancers, whatever, sitar players, sarod players, tabla players, because they don't have any holistic perspective. to what they are doing or what somebody else needs to do in relation, in correlation to what they are doing.
Yeah.
So having said that, and knowing that I'm from the same field, just because you bring a dancer into your school education system, or you bring a musician into your school education system, which is what we did when we got the NCERT to include dance and music education in the 80s in schools. The idea behind that was that everybody needed exposure to Indian arts and culture, because Indian arts and culture was a treasure trove, and like I say, culture is your identity, and you need to know about it. Even if you're not a practicing artist, it doesn't matter, but you need to know what it is and how people delve into it, and what's the process of it. The process. Again, I come back to the process.
Yeah.
So we just said, okay, let us introduce dance and music. So it was a collective kind of a forum, and the NCERT had many such discussions with many fora all over the country, and they took they took opinions of some people, and at that time the idea was to integrate music and dance learning. It's not education, it's learning. Music and dance learning and painting and whatever else, just like sports learning, into schools, so that you get the basic kind of an understanding of what it is. And if somebody wanted to pursue it further, the person could then go to a better teacher, or to a more qualified kind of a teacher, and learn from that person in depth. That was the whole idea of it.
Okay.
It's happening. Most schools in North India, most schools all over India do have dancers and musicians and others who are part of their the teachers. I mean, part of the teaching fraternity, and they are teaching. But then these children are only chosen for an annual day program or for some special program. They're not given value or marks based on their expertise or their proficiency in the arts. They are not. They have to go back, and if they have to be considered good students, they have to have fantastic marks in science, fantastic marks in maths, fantastic marks thing. By doing this, we also Chaitanya ji, in the 80s, we kind of relegated humanities to the background. We started focusing only on science and technology. We said these subjects that took you into a profession of science and technology became more important than humanities. Now, humanities give you a holistic view of life. At least you understand your geography, you understand your history, you understand your cultural, kind of lineage, your heritage. Devoid of all of that, you have computer programmers who are only good at, programming software. Now, how can this person integrate?
Let me intervene. We will bring more topics in the coming rounds. So let me just get some inputs from Devani ma'am also regarding this, how the artist can play in Indian classroom. How can artists be the educators, or what is the role?
Yes, Chaitanya ji. I think it's such a wonderful question, because what we are discussing today about new education policy, and there is so much of buzz about integration of art in the curriculum. The whole process starts from the classroom. And the classroom, I view them as an extremely fertile ground for, learning. And if there is so much of synergy, there's so much of energy in this particular space. And so if it is utilized and managed appropriately, then this space can do wonders. Now, when you talk about role of artists, they have a lot of variety and a menu on their platter, because you often, witness that the classrooms of, the art classrooms, arts or dance or music or theater, they are very buzzing with a lot of noise and a lot of happiness. So now here the expectation is, the expectation from the art educators becomes very high. So small basic things like, even creating classrooms in a way where There is a lot of flexibility that is provided to the student. The teacher, so small things like the movement of the educator within the class, the way it has been happening in the art and the arts classrooms, or probably the seating arrangement, these small things. Now, secondly, what I would like to bring the attention is that when the art is taught well, or in schools where art is high as a subject in terms of deliverance and where it is integrated, we see the outcome of the student achievement is much higher, because there is a harmonious blend of mind, body, and soul. And the student is, as Pratibha ji very rightly said, it is the process that is important. And in, though it is the experience that the student is undergoing. So coming back to the classroom, I think the role of the educators becomes, art educators become extremely important, as they are at the foundation where the students' cognitive, social, and their emotional abilities can be honed. And more so, the 21st century skills of collaboration, resilience, communication, these are those skills which are required by the students. And these are those skills which I feel the artists, educator artists, as we are calling them, they can do a great role in nurturing these elements in the students.
Okay.
So I would,
Thank you, Devani ma'am. So one thing I will 100% agree with Pratibha ma'am said is, definitely it is not possible to correlate with the technology, education, and arts. But I have seen the students when I used to teach many years back. I have seen students who are very studious in learning. They used to perform well in arts, especially in dance. So when the people are more into technology, my feel is that arts can definitely be a saver where they can balance the whole life. So let me move now to Bidisha ma'am, where we listened from the children's students' point of view, the school point of view. Now the next role is how can a student, with the help of art, can be a leader.
Okay, thank you, Chaitanya ji, for asking that question. But before I sort of specifically talk about that, and Pratibha ji is here and Devyani have spoken. I don't know how much more I can add to that experience. But there are 2-3 things that I'd like to share. One is an interesting conversation, right? My son was 4 years old or 5 years old, and in a school that he was going, the teacher wrote to me saying that he was having some problem with mathematics. And she called me and I went for a meeting. And, she said that he asked some odd questions. I think he was a little older, not 4 or 5, sorry, about 6, 7 years old. And he asked certain odd questions, maybe when I think some algebra was being introduced or something else was being introduced. And so I said, okay, why do you feel they're odd questions? They may be just out of curiosity, right? So instead of saying X and Y, if he asked, why can't it be G and F? Which I thought, not being a maths person, but I thought was a valid question to ask, right?
Yeah.
And then I told him that, he plays a lot of instruments, and I see that he's able to create a lot of interesting patterns when he's playing those instruments. What would you say about that? And she said, oh, Bidisha, we do music with our heart and we do mathematics with our mind. I'm just sharing this, not because I want to undermine the teacher. She was a wonderful person and she really helped my son. But these are certain misconceptions that I think we live with, right? Music comes from the heart, dance comes from the heart, you don't use your mind to create. The other thing that is very interesting, and I remember reading somewhere when Pablo Picasso talks about, when we talk about an artist, what do we think of an artist as? As part of larger society, do we think of an artist like a painter is someone who just has eyes and therefore he paints, or someone has a ear and therefore he or she is a musician? I think the point that he tries to make is that every artist or every person is a kind of political being, right? And we are, as artists, I think everyone is constantly alert to the heart-rending things that are happening, the burning things that are happening, the happy things that are happening, and molding oneself, to that likeness. So I think, a lot of our problems of how we think about art, and therefore art in education itself, rises from a lot of our misconceptions. So that's my, and I'm sharing that out of experience of talking to people. Coming to the more specific question, and I think what Devyani and Pratibhaji were all saying, I see the artist role and what can the student learn from an artist? So many things. I think the artist role, firstly, as an educator, if I look at it, I think because an artist is primarily through a lot of discussions and exchange of ideas and experiences, is actually co-constructing, co-constructing, and that's the kind of learning that's taking place in the classroom. And therefore, even the artist is providing for a experiencing learning process, right? So because the artist is not someone who is coming with as a, as an expert, but the approach of the artist, the process that I think Pratibhaji was also talking about, which is so important. Artist as an educator comes as a co-creator, as a co-constructor. And I think that is very important and special, and that allows for a lot of learning, and that's how children would learn. But I also feel that artists as collaborators, like Devyani was saying, 21st century school education, very, very cliched. But I truly believe that artists come as collaborators. They have a great sense of how people can work together, and they actually make that happen, in whether it's in a classroom or outside the classroom. That kind of collaborative process happens, and therefore that becomes a real experience through which children learn. The other thing I feel that children can significantly learn, of course, Pratibhaji is a role model, right? So the artist engages with students as a mentor or as a role model, and therefore there is, first she probably does it through her own practice, right? So she's a practicing artist, and I think that is so important. Second, by demonstrating, I think, their own particular methods and critical and creative approaches that they have to the art form. That becomes so significant for a learner, whether that's a child or an older. So I think that's another thing that a student gets to learn. The third thing, I think, by just kind of embodying the concept of an artist. And when I say an artist, I just want to clarify. I think many of us are just performers. Yeah, Pratibhaji is an artist. Today we lost another very well-known artist, Pandit Debu Chaudhary. We lost him, artist, right? Pandit Rajan Shajan Mishra, all artists. So I think that is what we are talking about. They embody being an artist and they live their life. So certainly a child who's experiencing an artist, role model becomes such an important. All of us have grown with so many role models. The two other things which I feel are so significant that a child gets to experience and learn is that, an artist is also a social activist, according to me, because artists consider that they have a responsibility towards the social and the sort of political issues that are happening. They're expressing and reacting or responding to that. So students see artists as social activists. And last but not the least is, I think, an artist always has skills and knowledge that has come to them through certain research. So students see artists in process, in continuity, and see them as researchers and inquirers. And while we're talking about the NEP, there's so much talk about the inquiry-based learning. I think what better way but to have an artist as a teacher, because then you see the entire inquiry-based learning happening, and what gets produced, whether it's a painting, whether it's music, or whether it is just an experience. I think children get to understand that process of inquiry. So among
Thank you.
many things, these are few things that I could think of.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, ma'am, for the wonderful conversation and the insights. So coming back to Pratibha, ma'am, you have been, part of so many boards in education as well as in arts. And we have also seen that you were instrumental in designing the curriculum for NCERT. So now when we come back to the school, the curriculum, the education, how do you think that it is possible to integrate the art at the school level where both the student and the educator can get fulfillment, satisfaction, they can be more energetic in delivering the lectures, or how can it enhance the teaching learning process? Where do exactly that art concept fit in?
So I'm just going to answer your question first, but the larger question is more important. When we kind of, like I said, spoke about the syllabus for NCERT, at that time, that was 30 years ago, 40 years ago. So almost for 30, 35 years ago, the concepts were very different. And what
Yeah.
needed to be introduced was very different. So we just said, okay, so every school should have a dance teacher, every school should have a music teacher. Let the schools choose among the pool. They can choose a Kathak teacher. If a Kathak teacher is available, they can choose a Bharatanatyam teacher, there's a Kathakali teacher, a Kuchipudi teacher, or Hindustani vocal, Hindustani instrumental, sitar, sarod, tabla, different kinds of teachers, whoever they can afford and who they can access. Now the problem, what happened, we realized later on, is that every school had on their, like I said, on the board, teachers who they could access. So one school had a Kathakali teacher and maybe some Carnatic vocalist. Another school would have a Kathak teacher. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Devyani, because you were a, principal. So you could not have had a teacher who taught all the 7 styles of classical dance. You could not have had a teacher who taught you Carnatic music and Hindustani music and instrumental music and percussive music, instruments and stuff like that. You could not have had that. You could not afford to have it, and no child can learn from with this kind of an enormity that we have. So we just at that time were short-sighted and said, at least children will get to know about it. And it was the same short-sightedness, of understanding an icon and the process that Spick McKay started, getting famous artists to perform in schools. We were hoping that somewhere along the way, somebody's mind will be changed, and that one child may take up the arts as a profession and change their lifestyle. But it may have happened. I don't know. It may have contributed. I really don't know. But I really think that now we don't have time for that. What we have seen right now, I mean, and I'm going to come back to the larger picture, Devyani, I mean, if you can please, bear with me. What I'm saying is there's a huge disconnect between life and art amongst these children who are looking for livelihood, for professional kind of a life. So even when you're talking about professional life, like, Vidisha just spoke about, from the heart, from the mind. So most of us dancers are thought of as mindless, which means what? Which kind of, translates to brainless twits, right? I mean, that you're not socially and politically aware. You're just somebody out there who can just dance. In North India, Chaitanya ji, in South India, they respect classical dancers and musicians a lot. A lot of people in North India think of dancers and musicians as nachne wale, gaane wale, right? There's a cultural, societal kind of an implicit understanding of what a dancer is or what a singer or a musician is. We know we're not that anymore. So therefore, time and again, and an artist like me, I have to prove that I'm on par with you as an educator. I'm on par with any of you. I mean, I can speak science, I can speak maths, I can speak, physics, chemistry. That I can also speak Bharatanatyam. I can also do that. So basically, that really is the challenge. The challenge is this bifurcation between art and science.
But
They have to be, both art and science have to be integrated if you want to have a holistic, personality.
So do you think that this NEP will be able to narrow down that gap? Will be able to connect both this together? Whatever you are saying is disconnected. How will it help?
So I believe I have gone through the NEP, and I believe that theoretically it will help.
Okay.
You
Okay.
know, theoretically it will help. Now, when I was young, I used to go to a convent, and we had something called moral science
Hmm.
classes.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
what did we learn in that moral science class? We learned how to be a good human being, right? This is moral, this is ethical, this is immoral, this is unethical.
Yeah.
Nowadays, children don't go to a moral science class. There are no moral science classes.
Yeah.
Now, I think when you start talking about the Indian way of life, Indian culture, Indian heritage, Indian, and from nursery, not from middle school, by which time the child is already a cynic or his parents are cynics. But then they're saying, oh, iska faida kya hai? I mean, what's the use of this? I mean, what are you learning? You're learning about Bharatanatyam, Kuchipudi, what's the use of it?
Yeah.
It is useful. It is useful to know what
Mm.
your culture is, your heritage is, your lineage is. Who are you in this whole, wide world? And who are you as a global Indian?
Yeah.
Who are you? So I think theoretically, when they start restructuring the syllabi and they start talking about, ancient India, Indian culture, Indian arts, you're talking about Aryabhatta, you're talking about, the sutras, you're talking about Bhasa, Kalidasa, the works of it. You're giving an introduction into some one Indian language other than your mother tongue, and Hindi being the national language, your mother tongue being, the language that you speak. If you emphasize on one more Indian language, that you have to learn at from the school level, from primary level, not later on. They can discard it in the, when they come to high school, because they may not have use for it. But until high school, this should be made compulsory, of learning English, of course, as a medium, as an international language, Hindi, your national language, your regional language, your local language. Yours, I presume, is Malayalam minus Kannada. So that in any case, we can't, that we can't let those languages die. But introducing one more language that a child can learn. Now, through that language, you introduce the child to Indian culture. There should be a subject called Indology. Now, do we have Indology anymore anywhere? We do not have it. They should give diplomas. There should be diplomas awarded in my mother's time to a person who studied Indology. It was a 1.5 to 2 year course. You do a master's degree program and a post diploma in Indology.
Yeah.
Where is that post diploma in Indology now? So these kinds of people who learn from primary school, their own culture, their roots, where they come from, who are the people around. I mean, geographically, historically, I mean, empirically, the lineage, then they start understanding that they're not, imports from some alien world. If you see a lot of people, they say, oh, you do Bharatnatyam? Where do you do Bharatnatyam? That irritates me. I mean, where does a dancer dance?
Yeah.
A dancer dances on stage. I mean, where does a professional dancer dance? A professional dancer dances on a professional stage when she's invited to perform, and she's invited to, oh, you do Bharatnatyam. I mean, that's for a long time of my life. I had to, contend with presumably very educated, very, kind of high-placed individuals who would be so condescending to me.
But
And who would actually ask me, where do you dance? And I would say, where does one dance? And sometimes I used to get irritated, and I said, I can also dance on your head if you pay me. So basically, I mean, is that what they want to learn? So, I mean, what I'm trying to say is, from our language, pardon me if I'm taking a little too long, but from our communication, we have to take away these kinds of sentences. How do you take them away from the communicative process? You take them by making them understand from primary what it is, how important this is, and how important a part of holistic development and culture it is to understand it.
Yeah.
To know it. Don't become a professional dancer, but at least know what it is.
Yeah, but practically, when you come to the practice, or when you say that this can be implemented in schools, the first and important thing is, how do we educate the teachers, or how can we create awareness among the teachers that this is also important in their life? So that is more important when we think of implementing it in the curriculum. And as you say, it can definitely bring down the disconnect. how do you think that the teachers we can create as an artist and educator? How do you think that we can create that interest among the teachers so that it is part of the classroom?
So, I mean, basically, there are 2, 3 ways that people normally do it. They do it through workshops,
Okay.
where you have an interactive workshops with different, people from different fields, and the person talks. And the reason I'm saying this is because even for the civil services probationers, the
Yeah.
IFS and the IAS probationers,
Ah.
when they're in the last year, final year, they go to Masuri to have
Yeah.
a hands-on training. When they get a hands-on training, they also invite artists, to tell them what it is. If you're going abroad, you might as well know what this is. What is Indian art? What is Indian culture? What is it? What is the dance? You may
Correct.
just get exposed to one dance form, but then there are multiple dance forms,
Yeah.
and these are what it is. And this is basic knowledge. It is not when someone, you meet a foreigner tomorrow, and you're a officer of of our government, and the foreigner's asking, "Oh, I saw a beautiful Manipuri performance, and your country is fantastic." And this person saying, "What is Manipuri?" Our own foreign service officer says, "What is Manipuri?" Now, that therein lies the disconnect in our education system, is what I'm trying to say. And
Okay.
first of all, we have to have these workshops and intensive workshops, and maybe these kinds of sessions that you're having right now, with a
Yeah.
lot of educators, with
Yes.
other teachers from other schools and colleges. And they should come up with questions, and we should then try to answer those questions and try to
Correct.
get them involved, so they
Correct.
understand how the young, from the young age itself, how you can mold a personality into
Yeah.
into being a proud human being, a proud Indian, not to feel disconnected between Bharat and India. And I think the new NEP
Well,
is about
well said.
integrating Bharat with
Yeah,
India.
this
You
is
know.
exactly what we need at this point of time, especially when we bring in this NEP 2020. Moving next to Devani ma'am. So what is your opinion, ma'am, about the art integrated curriculum? And we have been hearing this for the past few months. And how do you think that the schools can adapt to this? As just like what Pratibha ma'am said, that we need to have intensive workshops or classes or training for the teachers so that it can finally end up to the students, or we can reach out to the students in a massive way. So what is your take on that?
Yeah, thank you, Chaitanya. Here I would like to pick up from where Pratibha ji, her conversation and her view. So way back, as she said, that way back when NCERT had introduced art education in the curriculum. So the journey began there, and the NEP talks about art integration. So from introduction of art education to integration, that in itself has placed a lot of responsibility on the art educator. So before that, we need to understand what is the expectation. What does it mean when they talk about AIL, in art integrated learning? So here they are not the policymakers are not talking about the student, of course, the student developing an art skill. They are talking about a much bigger role that the art educators are to play. They want art integrated in the curriculum, meaning that it becomes an integral part of the teaching, learning methodology, pedagogy. That is the whole expectation from the art integrated curriculum. Second is, of course, the realization that why, for example, the arts theater classes are so joyous, why the students perform and they are in a space where they are exploring, they are experiencing, they are even celebrating the joy of probably the symphonies that they learn, or the colors that they explore, or the dance forms that they learn. Reason being, there is no judgment. So the performance was much better. So as Pratibha ji very rightly said, when it was introduced, there was one teacher who was an art teacher. An art teacher is expected to teach all forms of dance also, at times do theater also, and when there was an art music teacher and a dance teacher. So those were the things. Nobody kind of specified. The very fact that they are talking so much that about integrating art in the mainstream of curriculum is the expectation is to go beyond just learning the skill. Now, the very fact the child finds a lot of joy in learning since he realizes there is no judgment happening. Now, when the art integration happens, last few months are probably 7-8 months, there was a lot of talk about how do we integrate art. So all the educators, all the teachers, what they started doing, again, that is where the thought which has gone into the making of this particular aspect of NEP and how it is implemented. So what everybody started saying, okay, do a role play or probably paint a picture. No, it is not that. It is holistically. So for example, if a concept, I'll give an example, if a concept like rain is being taught, so why can't the art teachers take the lead and then merge it with the other streams, other academic streams? So the purpose was not just to teach rain. The purpose was also to make the child understand about water, about the scarcity, about the chemical composition. But how will that interest come in the child? Everybody gets wet, but there are few who feel the rain. That is the role that art educators are required to play. Now coming to, and then there were certain questions, because I remember a few people, educators came that, ma'am, how is it possible? Maths and art integration, how do we do an art activity in math? It's just like probably, integrating water and oil. Mixing water and oil. Maths mein kuch to ho hi nahi. No, it is, you don't restrict yourself with designing of activities. You have to understand the concept, the theories, the objects, the geometry, the space, the rhythm. These are the things, these are the concepts which art and maths or science or social science, they can integrate. Coming to the second part, which you said that how seamlessly this art integration can happen. So this a tip to all the educators, the school managements and all, very important for them is to look, first is the material resources that have to be identified. So I have taken out 5 kind of material resources when you're designing that art activity. One is very important, that whenever a lesson planning is done, whatever planning has been done, art educators do not have to be told. They have to become the integral part of curriculum planning, lesson planning. Only then this art integration can happen. So 3 things I identified when it says how seamlessly. One is what kind of materials a school would be using and integrating. The second would be the ways to involve the community in a very, very meaningful way. And the third is the utilization of the space. So when I talk about the materials that are used while planning and selecting the material equipment, the art and the other educators have to be economical, environmental friendly, reusable, innovative, and locally available. Why I am especially emphasizing on this is because art integration will not mean putting another pressure on the school managements that we need another budget now. No, we don't need that. We need to seamlessly integrate, look around. That is why NEP talks about that it has to be environmental friendly, usable, economical. Second most important thing is how art integration seamlessly can happen is when the curriculum involves the local communities. When I say local communities, this is exactly what Pratibha ji was saying. You know, involving artists to have those kind of workshops, give the children the real experience. Do not please reduce it to activity, which is the reality that has been happening across in last few months. Give them that kind of exposure. Involve the craftsmen, involve the artists, involve the outsource. Do not just rely on the in-house art educators. You have to involve, outsource the professionals to train the trainers and then take the baton forward. And the last I'll take a minute is that the space. Now, the space is very important, and this is very, very symbolic. That how art, we have to break with the regimentization. We have to go make the space, whichever, whether it is a maths teacher who's teaching, or it has to create that kind of flexibility of space. Create those corners within your classrooms, which are presentation corners, especially in the primary and foundational elementary years. This can happen. Give those kind of spaces to the child, which are those own spaces where the child feels free. So each and every school teams, two things. Number one, will have to collaborate with their art educators while planning, and two, with the management, that how well we can integrate art education in the curriculum. So expect the reliances on the pedagogy again, and not just teaching them those skills. Through those skills, empowering the children to perform a bigger role. I hope I've made myself clear.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. From school towards the industry, Bidisha ma'am is very well experienced, and one of the most important skills that would require in the coming years is the leadership skill. So as an entrepreneur, what do you think, ma'am, is the best way in which we can associate, or how is it possible that arts can help in developing that leadership skills or traits? How is it possible?
So, Chaitanya ji, I think, the connection between leadership and art has been made many, many times over. So it's not something that is new. And usually it's kind of singled out, I think, because of certain properties or elements that are characteristics of arts. For example, you say a classical musician, musician is able to create by improvising, right? And I think the analogies are quite compelling between a leader and, a leader in any sphere and art. But having said that, I think, very frankly speaking, again, the same point, the same attributes that distinguishes a great artist, an artist like Pratibha ji and many others, from a performer or a mediocre, and again, not trying to be judgmental, but I'm just trying to make that distinction, is exactly what is the distinguishing factor between an exceptional leader and the sort of ordinary counterparts, right? So I think what the arts do as a process in building the leadership are exactly the same thing that an artist does. I think it requires a lot of courage to be able to write a poem, create something, sing a song, go up on stage and sing or dance. It's an act of courage. And I think every leader also has to have that act of courage. So while I'm talking about these characteristics, I think the same characteristics hold. So when we go through a art learning process, therefore we also develop courage. I think the second thing that happens is the openness to different perspectives, right? So even a good leader will always look at many perspectives before coming to a certain decision or making a certain choice. Will be very open to perspectives which he or she may not otherwise agree to. Again, the art process itself is about being open to multiple perspectives. The third thing is, of course, the most obvious. So creativity helps in problem solving. I think the other side of creativity, I think, cannot be limited to looking at just that I dance or I sing. And this brings me to a beautiful, sharing that I was working with the government school children in Delhi. And this principal once, he gave me a group of children and he said, these children have all failed in their exams. See what you can do with them. I felt very bad at that point, but I also felt it was an opportunity. And after going through a certain process of, working with them around stories, their stories, and making films out of their stories, there was a girl who at the last class, I asked her, what did you learn through this time? What are the new things that you learned? And she told me that she had learned art. So I said, this is a word you knew. You were drawing and painting. What happened? What new happened? And she said, नहीं, अभी तक ना मुझे आर्ट लगता था कि खाली ड्राइंग और पेंटिंग ही है. अभी मुझे लगता है कि अगर मैं अपना कोई प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व कर लूं, तो वो भी आर्ट है. Yeah. And for me, that's hugely telling, I think. That, so therefore, I think being a part of a creative process with an artist or an art educator encourages and builds those skills of being able to problem solve. I think art is a great space for practicing mindfulness. That is something, and again, leadership is about mindfulness, it's about self-awareness. Like I think Pratibha ji said, no, I mean, you don't even think before you ask that, where do you dance? It's a total lack of awareness. I may not know. Not knowing is not a fault, but not being aware and being, not being able to know when to ask, what kind of language, I think that's a total lack of awareness. So art practice, I think, builds a lot of mindfulness and self-awareness. Also, Pratibha ji, I keep saying this because I think nobody can learn how to dance like her overnight or paint overnight, right? So, being able to practice and a deliberate sort of practice of a skill and a rigor and doing that every single day. I think that is about leadership as well, to be able to, hone that and continuously practice. Again, I think through any kind of art practice, children learn and develop rigor, which I think is incredible. And last, but I think the most important is, art is like experiencing the joy of life. And if that is something that is not there in children's education, why should children want to go to school? They go to school because they want to meet their friends. They want to participate in a competition. They want to draw. They want to paint. They want to play. They want to play without a purpose. It's not always that you must have something that is on your mind. You want to just play an instrument. You want to express. So I think that is where I see the entire connection between leadership and creative practice and art practice.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the wonderful explanation with the right example you cited from the Delhi school. So we are moving to the next round now, and I think we have almost like 25 minutes, 20 to 25 minutes. So the question is back to Pratibha ma'am. Ma'am, you have been researching or have done extensive research in the use of television as a medium of instruction in the primary and middle schools, and it has been so revolutionary. And of course, it is again in the websites and so many portals I saw. So what is your? Can you guide the administrators? Can you guide the principals or the educators on how it can be of so importance? And we are talking in the right context now. And in the years to come, when the NEP is implemented, what will be the importance and how can we augment it?
Again, the use of television in education was, devised by me and spoken about me extensively in the 80s, when television was new to our country, right? I mean, people did not know what to do with television, and they were talking about content for television. So, of course, there was cinema and there were soap operas that people produced. So at which time, I spoke about and we wrote about, how can you use television for art education? So then much later, other people also joined in the chorus for a separate channel. And I
Hmm.
think DD Bharti, Doordarshan Bharti, came into being, and DD Bharti was dedicated to music, dance, and poetry, painting, and people from the arts world. So that's a different thing altogether. Today we are in a digital world. It's got far-reaching consequences, much more than we ever envisaged when we spoke about getting television into our homes in the 80s. So in the digital space, everyone is a painter, everyone is a poet, everyone is a dancer. They just kind of do a recording on their smartphone and they put it up on the internet space, right? And you get 10 likes, you get 20 likes, you may get 2,000 likes. Some people get 25 lakh likes, and then they start believing that they are superstars. So we call them dancers of Instagram, artists of Instagram. The virtual dancers, the virtual musicians who haven't seen real world. So these people also suffer from the same problem of non collaboration, of not understanding the aspect of human to human transmission. That is the second point about NEP, Devyani. I mean, the thing is about this NEP, reiterates about patashalas. They speak about patashalas, the kind of transmission that happened from the guru or the educator to the shishya, the student. It's a human to human communication, a human to human transmission.
Yes.
If we can use, I mean, we can use technology to support this when we cannot be there physically present, but we have developed modules, we've developed content which can take children step by step in an interesting way, then it's wonderful. So I'm not going to take away from the fact that television or technology or internet or the digital space can be less of a value add in education. It cannot. It can only add more value if the content is good, because all technology is as good as its content. Like Marshall McLuhan famously said, the medium is the message, right? I mean, you can't if you show something dumb on television, then you are propagating something dumb. You see a lot of reality shows, you see a lot of those kinds of stand-up comedians, and you think, oh, this is, I mean, I can't relate to this. It's kind of, again, not a value judgment, but I can't relate to this. What kinds of jokes are these? They don't even set me thinking, laterally. They're sexist jokes, they're gender-based jokes, they're jokes that are totally, incomprehensible, totally stupid. And people are, guffawing and laughing at it. And you feel sorry for your society. You feel sorry for people around you, that they're actually enjoying, and they think that this is even a joke, this is that something so sexist and something so gender biased could even be a joke. So what I'm trying to say is, our responsibility now is to harness young minds in the right direction. And to do that, art is important for the very many reasons that Vidisha has spoken about, for the very many reasons that Devyani has spoken about. Art is important because art makes you understand yourself like nobody else can. Even your parents don't know you as well as you know yourself. And art is an internal process which makes you, it's like meditation. It's like, I know, makes you understand your limitations, understand possibilities, understand, what you can do with yourself. Like critical thinking, lateral thinking, scientific thinking, artistic thinking. There's no difference between the heart and the mind in art. Because let me also tell you, among my own students, I've seen that those who are fantastic dancers are also fantastic in studies. They don't really have to spend too much time studying, because art improves your memory, right? And art, music and dance is also mathematics, for God's sake. I mean, it's not separate from mathematics, because while you're singing, you're going to a certain thala structure. The thala, you're kind of breaking down the thala into threes, into fours, into fives, into sevens, into 11s, and you're making complex thala kind of structures in your mind, as the dancer is. So you are constantly a mathematician too. So your brain is working both the brains are working, not just one part of the brain that has the emotional or the artistic quotient is working, but the other part of the brain, which has an academic quotient, is also working while you are in the process of dancing or music, or singing or something like that. You also know Chaitanya ji, that some of the best scientists of this country always were also very, very good musicians, right?
Exactly.
They played the piano, they played
Yeah.
Bach, they played Mozart, they played, because when they played was when they had that inspiration
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
of,
Yes.
or they solved a mathematical problem, a very
Yeah.
complex mathematical problem they solved
Yeah.
while they were playing music,
Yes.
right? So
Yeah.
some of the, I mean, best scientists, I mean, most best scientists of the world, I'm talking about, not just India, were also great musicians. I
Yeah.
mean, they knew how to play a musical instrument, or they knew how to sing, or they knew the philosophy behind it. So what I mean, art gives you value at many different levels, But most importantly, art helps a child understand oneself. Art helps deal with mental stress, mental health issues, and of issues of diffidence. When you don't get enough marks, you feel that you're good for nothing. And you just feel that, I mean, like all my students, all the friends, everyone's got 99, 99, I've got 75. I mean, what's wrong with me? You don't have a teacher telling you it's okay to get 75. Your people, parents and teacher pushing you. No, you must get 99. You must get 99. If you don't get 99, you don't get admission in a college. Now, these kinds of, there's a breakdown, I mean, a breakaway of these barriers in the mind. Oh, if I don't get admission in a college, I'll become an artist. I can become, a musician. I can become a painter. I can become a filmmaker. I can do so many things with my life, which are of equal value to me, because the value that art gives you is for your own being, not how the world sees you. The
Yeah.
world can see you as many different things, but
Yes.
do you value yourself? You value what you can do.
Yeah.
And so often, children with different abilities, with special
Yeah.
abilities, do profoundly better in
Yeah.
the arts.
Yeah.
They profoundly better. You teach them music. You teach them painting. You teach them whatever. Like, you should show them visuals, like you said. The digital media. You show them visuals, and they respond so beautifully to it, because they respond to it. And I think some autistic children are very, very, very intelligent. Their brain is developed,
And one more thing,
they're
ma'am.
geniuses in a special, in a special kind of a way. So I'm
Yes.
saying geniuses also, I mean, artists are geniuses in many, many different ways. They have a life story behind them. They know how to, deploy or employ their own resources of their mind, their heart, their body, their hands.
Yes.
They know
Yes.
how to deploy the resources to make meaning of their life. And that means
Agreed, ma'am. One more important thing I would add, as you said, the one of the important things I have noticed is the gaining of the confidence. Gaining of the confidence when you practice art. As you rightly said, whenever a student feels that I am not able to score marks in subjects, he definitely has an opportunity, and we have to open up those opportunities. And as you rightly said, how you respond, the expression, the reaction, the expression, how can we make it more and more artistic, and how can they be sensible? So from that, let me carry this to Devani ma'am, specifically about the nurturing of the artistic sensitivities and creative responses, and it has to be given high importance in education. And what do you think, ma'am, is how is it possible for us to encourage that form of expression in our schools right from the beginning of this NEP 2020?
So thank you. Thank you, Chaitanya ji. Again, I would draw attention to NEP because, being an educator, again, I come back to the document that has been produced. There is a lot of importance, which is very good, that has been given to the elementary education, and which has actually, good 5 to 7 years have been dedicated. Along with that, there is an expectation to make the child wean away from rote learning and go on to experiential learning. Now, at the elementary stage, we need to understand the child just walks out of the closed home environment, and it is the first time that he's having the feel of the real world. So there is a lot of curiosity, there is a lot of inquisitiveness, and the energy is very high. So the questioning is a lot. Now, this kind of questioning can best be done when the child is undergoing an experiential learning process. Now, so instead of teaching, again, I come back to, instead of teaching rain, instead of teaching soil, let the child go into that space. Instead of teaching the child about, forms of, about mathematics, let the child learn through the rhythm of, some poetic mechanism or music. Here, art will play a great role. The art educators, so the regular educators, have to be trained by the art educators. The child has to relate the academic concepts which we are trying to instill or impart them through this experiential learning experience. Children now build on those simple concepts as well as and relate them to academic concepts. So let them, what you experience, you carry throughout your lifetime. And again, elementary, let the child immerse in experiencing the world around him, whether it is through dance or music or trying to feel the, probably the leaves, or trying to feel the rain, or so leave the child in environment. Now, who is going to play that role? That role will be played, again, as I said, by art educators. So, again, coming back, we've already delved into all these things. One last thing, that once the teacher begins to utilize art integrated learning methodology, she should need to work on the dynamics of planning. This is extremely important. So all integrated learning, art integrated learning, would require linking art experiences to subject matter seamlessly and identify those methods. That, okay, if I need to hone communication skills, or if I want to empower build on the child the feeling of resilience, if I have to hone in the child critical thinking, then instead of, these are those skills which no book can teach you, which only experience. Now, the beauty of art is there is a lot of interplay of emotions, there is a lot of communication, there is a lot of scope for decision making, there is a lot of scope for risk-taking mechanisms. So the child, when the child is probably performing in a theater, when the child is, composing a symphony, then the child is away from, will I, as we all discussed, that will my marks be lost, or will I be wrong or right? The child is enjoying, the process is very enjoyable, the whole experience is enjoyable. So instead, this particular these skills have to be honed at the elementary level. Catch them young, try and integrate as much art concepts as you can in the elementary years of the child's development.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very
Can
much.
I just add something to what Devyani is saying, if that's okay?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sure.
Okay, I'll just take 2 minutes. One thing which I'm really sort of itching to say is that while the NEP talks about art integration, all of this has been talked about in the previous education policies as well. And if you look at the 2005 National Curriculum Framework, you will see a lot of that sitting there as well. And I think one of the things that it tells me is that, and having interacted with a lot of teachers, it is very difficult to do art integration, right? One is teaching art, teaching an art form itself, right? That also, I believe, not every artist, like Pratibha ji said, is going to be a good teacher. So there is the competency of teaching, and then there is the, being an artist. That's one. Art integration itself, one is using art as a tool. So for example, if I'm teaching mathematics and I want to use drawing as a way to do certain concept understandings, that's one. But integration is far, far more difficult and as a process. And I feel that is the part where if I had to critique, any policy, I think my issues are that from policy to actually getting implemented and supporting the teachers, it's easier said than done that work with an art teacher. If in my life, in my own home, I don't speak my mother tongue, I don't eat the food that my mother makes. If I don't sing the songs, I don't draw. We didn't go to school and learn a lot of those, a lot of it came from the home. And therefore, as teachers also, I feel the pain of the teacher, because the teacher also has to be able to have that experience, and live it in their life to then be able to take it to the classroom. And I think for taking it to the classroom, certainly we need to look at processes. How do we prepare our teachers to be able to do this integration? I think integration is the most difficult thing to do. So therefore, if we don't have structures and processes, and we don't have those and teachers don't go through the same process that a child has to go through, then it's very hard, even if you do give certain directions. So I think a lot of investment has to be made for teachers to be able to get that. And I don't like the word training, but development. I think good professional development is required, and it's available to be able to. We can learn from. I had the opportunity of attending a webinar a few days ago of one of the directors, or I think he's currently the director of the museum in Switzerland, and he talked about the art integration program that they have developed within the museum. Now those are things that they've done over years. There are things we can learn from it and take it. So art integration, I feel, is the hardest in my understanding and experience. I just wanted to put that point forward.
Yeah, let me take one more short question to shoot a short question to Bidisha ma'am, just as an addition. One thing is taking from Pratibha ma'am's message, saying that okay, the students' mental health, mental well-being, the emotional well-being, it can arts can definitely help if that is implemented in the school. The secondly, when Devani ma'am said that the role of art educators. So how do you think that these two can be integrated and brought into a classroom? And is it possible for the artists to support to design such a kind of curriculum? And what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think, one of my learnings of working with teachers and art teachers over the last 10, 15 years is that I think with the structures that exist within the school, an artist to survive within that structure. And when I mean an artist, somebody who would require that space, that freedom to work, be an artist himself and herself, and at the same time be able to work with students. The structures, most schools don't have the structures.
Yeah.
There are schools which are beginning to understand artists and art educators and trying to open up, but I think we're far away. So having said that, I think what is very important is that can artists actually work with those? So there are artists who have, and this is the truth, right? Many artists choose to be teachers because it's a livelihood issue. You can't survive in this country on the basis of just performing. And therefore they choose to become teachers, not really out of choice. So therefore, I think what is required is a combination of things. One is that we bring into the schools good professional development for art educators. There's enough good examples available across the world and within our own country as well. Bring those. I think artists, instead of being in the school 24/7, being outside, but playing a mentorship role, working with artists, art educators within those who have chosen, and for whatever reason have chosen to be in the school structure, support them, and then help them build curriculums which are satisfying for them as well as for the children. So I think that artists who are outside the system have an equal role to play. And then school systems, I think, need to provide professional development, to art educators by people who understand them and are able to find frameworks for them which work for them. Let's not apply certain frameworks that we use for, say, other subject teachers. And the last point I'd like to make is that why are we only talking about integration in the arts? When a child grows up at home, it's an integrated environment. There's language, there's food, there's art. Nobody says this is an artistic tradition, right? So, and this is something I've always thought about since my childhood. Why can't schools be like home, which are seamless, rather than these boxes going to maths, going to. So why can't? Where are the interconnections between math and physics and biology, all the subjects, language? We test comprehension for English in an English medium school where children are writing English everywhere, speaking English everywhere. We still test comprehension in the language exam. How is a child actually understanding what's going on in a social science class? Through English, right? So he's comprehending, he's understanding, or she's understanding. So
Yeah.
I think, those interconnections need to be re-established. A lot of transdisciplinary work is happening in many schools. And I feel that's the way ahead for us to, make those interconnections. Art will come within that. We don't have to,
That is
then look
really,
at art as one thing separately. That's
yeah, it's
my
right input. Yeah, right input. So next we will move to the questions by audience. Meenu ma'am, are you ready with the questions posted by the audience?
Yes, Chaitanya ji, I will just read out. We don't have too many, but there is one question which says, so far art education has been a neglected area in school system. Even the best of art teachers lose their initiative after being a part of the system. How to build up the capacity of art teachers to transact art integrated learning?
Yeah, Pratibha ma'am.
Well, that's exactly the problem that Vidisha was speaking about. Just a couple of minutes ago. That if you are going to forcibly integrate art into education, it's like you're sticking both with Fevicol or something, or with Fevikwik. It's not going to happen. It's going to break off sometime. Learning is a subliminal process. Like she said, living, loving, learning is a subliminal process. Things are layered, things are complex, things are integrated by themselves. You don't have to forcibly integrate something into something else. And because it's not going to stick, right? It's not going to stick. The problem also, I mean, which we haven't addressed today, is that we're talking about urban schools, schools that the wealthy go to, where there's dance and music. What happens to all those government schools where they don't have
Yes,
dance
yes,
teachers
yes.
or music
Yes.
teachers? What
Yeah.
happens to schools in smaller cities? What happens to schools in rural areas where there are no teachers? There are no classrooms, there are no buildings, there are no teachers, but they're only on paper. Now, how is NEP going to address all of that, right? So, in this context, I want to just mention one small experience I had. Uh, I mean, of the many, there is this NGO which goes to bastis in Vasant Kunj, Vasant Vihar area, and they pick up all the street children, and they have a kind of a schooling mechanism for these street children, children of vendors, and who don't go to formal schools, who don't go to any government schools either. They pick them up literally from the street, and they started inviting them to this little space they created inside of the basti itself. And they told them, okay, now come here, come paint the wall of this whatever you built. So first of all, they had to build it. They asked the children to come and build it. The children built it inside of their own basti. And they said, okay, paint this. So the children started painting different colors. What color do you want? Someone says, I want red. Someone says, I want white. Someone says, I want black. They would bring the paints and give it to the children. And the children painted, however they wanted. Then they told the child, why, after they painted the base, they told the children, now what do you want to see here? Do you want to see a flower? Do you see an animal? Do you see a picture? What do you see? Then some said flower, flower, flower. Okay, now paint that flower that you see. The flower
Yeah.
was in the mind's eye, right? In the child's mind, not a flower the child must have seen. So then someone does a flower, then somebody else comes and puts a leaf over there. Somebody else puts a stalk and a stem over there. So you enter the space. It's dynamic. It's dynamic because it kind of, first of all, you look at the colors and say, oh, then who did this? Then you see all these images. Some look like some faces, some eyes, some flowers, some animals, and then the children, and then you see a whole bunch of children out there, and they're jumping. And these, I think, those are the educators that we're looking at. You see, because they are not bringing their own education and their own formal learning to teach those children what they have already learned. But when I spoke to the teachers, they told me, ma'am, they were not even interested in coming and sitting in this place. They're children who are used to playing on the streets. How do you lure street children into a space, into a formal kind of a space, and tell them between 10 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in the evening, you should not be on the streets. You should come and sit here because I'm going to teach you.
Yeah.
Parents are not interested. Parents are not around. Nobody's interested. So then I spoke to, I kept going there, okay, and they invited me for for like 2 days, 3 days, and I used to go there, and some child would sing something, some child would dance something, and some child would paint something, and all these children were perfectly able children, I'm saying. So even then, they'd never gone to a formal school, and I kept going there, and I started talking to the children's parents. It's a basti, it's like a slum area, where inside of the slum area, these people had built with their own hand whatever they had built, and got a roof on top of it, and then they put computers into the into the room. It took them over 2-3 years to do that, but then this this very, very colorful space, and there are computers there, and you have the small stools. So whoever's donated anything to them, they kind of use that material in that space. It's not a formal school. And those young girls who were who were so committed and were doing this day in and day out, they took me to meet the parents, and I kept asking the parents, I said, ask them, why didn't you put your child to school? I said, where do we have the money? We don't even stay in one slum. We are like vendors. We are like nomads. We go from slum to slum, right? We put up our slum. So how can we, ask our children to go to school, and who's got the money? Nobody, we don't even know what they're going to do there. At least if they go on the street, they can earn some money because they can beg. So you're perpetuating begging. And these, people who work in the NGO, most of them girls, they kind of picked up these children and they brought them into the space. Now these kids can speak, they taught them letters, of course, they taught them words. So they could recite nursery rhymes, much to my, it's fun. They could recite nursery rhymes. They could sing their own songs, their own whatever songs, like the songs that we have in our own culture, like here, a lot of songs. And they said they come in the morning, they do prayer, then they paint, and someone says okay, and someone's trying to tell them about science, about environment, about cleanliness, about how to keep your environment clean, what's a human being, how the human being is supposed to relate to another, those kinds of things, just to make a human being out of these children. And the children are in the age group of 4 to 14.
Okay.
Impressionable age, a very, very, very impressionable age, where things can go terribly bad on the streets for these boys and girls. So what I'm trying to say is, our education has to be something like that, something that is natural and automatic in the learning process, not something that you try to perforce integrate.
Yeah, it has to be dynamic and it has to be spontaneous
and
rather than a formal kind of learning. So that is what you mean. So I have $1 million question for you, Pratibha ma'am, in the last round. So let us assume that you are given the responsibility of bringing the art into, whatever we discussed so far, and government is asking you, and you are given the torch to bear. So what will be your first step, and how much time will it take to see that okay, this has been successful? How will you respond to that?
So we can evaluate the success only generationally. We can, you start the process now, and the result of it will, you're going to see only the next generation of citizens of India. in
Yeah.
how they negotiate the space, because what we're trying to do is to make citizens out of these children, right? We're going to
Yes,
be
yes.
responsible citizens who are compassionate, kind, who have critical thinking abilities, who have logical kind of a mind, emotional and logical response, reasoning,
Yeah.
equitable society. We're trying to make them more humane, more compassionate, those kinds of things, which make all the good values of society, rooted in values, as we say. So, like I said, if you start now, I mean, in primary school now, you're going to see it after one generation whether this kind of an education policy and integration has had any impact. The MHRD did contact me for this, just to tell you, to be one of the pegs in this whole process. I mean, I'm not leading it or anything. There are several people who are doing several, different kinds of work. One of the little pegs. And my own understanding of it was, I said, in which schools do you want to, I mean, are you going to experiment with it, or are you going to just bring it as a uniform policy across board? Okay. And if you're going to bring it as a uniform policy across board, then what kind of, because education is a state subject, right? So the states can have their own formula of what they want the children to learn. So what kind of a uniform policy are you going to have? Then what about integration of, rural India and the poorer schools? Children, schools that don't have the tools, the resources, to simply to cope with the rest. And like you said, the problem is also with the educators, the teachers. Where are you going to harvest them, and where are you going to get them out of? It's the same society, it's same us. The pool is the same. Where are you going to get these people who are going to come and teach? So my own thinking was the first step would be to have to have studies on a daily basis of cultural studies, what you call cultural studies, through whether it's tool based, whether it is performance based, whether it is theatrical. I mean, theater is something which children are very good at, at a very young age. So whether it's theatrical, whether it's film, whether it's whatever the process is, which they can decide to bring in cultural studies from primary school, and then have a syllabus that syllabus can be developed. What do you teach in class 1, what do you teach in class 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? You can develop that. Through middle school, what do you teach? By the time the child comes to high school, what would you expect the child to know through these whatever studies the child has gone through, its own cultural studies? So you would know, because by then history, all those integrations would have happened automatically by itself, because the child would have already, the child starts asking questions also, right? I mean, Shantala, the queen of, the Vijayanagar Empire, was a dancer. What dancer was she, ma'am? Was she a Bharatanatyam dancer? Was she a Kathak dancer? A ma'am needs to, go back home and do her, Google or whatever, learning to come back and answer that question. So these are going to happen automatically in these kinds of schools. So this is a kind of a process. This is a curve that you have to, start, but then you have to start now. And probably by the time the child comes to high school, you have a different, experience. The child would have had a different experience of learning, of being in schools, in that kind of a system. It won't be like like a completely stressful kind of a period where you're worried about your marks all the time, but you have this. While saying this, I only want to make one more short point. I'd gone to Sweden once for an educational tour, where I was one of the educators who was invited from among a huge fraternity of us who were from different countries. And a very interesting process happens in these Swedish schools. I was informed that from primary, the child's special talent is kind of identified. Like, for example, a child likes photography, probably looks at pictures. Child looks at painting for a long period of time. It's not able to at that time vocalize that I love painting, but it's looking at the interest is painting. For another child, the interest is music. For another child, the interest is communication, theater, whatever it is. They observe the children in primary school. They observe what the special talent of that child is. Once they observe the children, they put that child in a formal training in that particular discipline. Like, supposing the child is showing a lot of interest in music, then that particular child is picked up and put in formal training with a music teacher, with a good music teacher, right? I mean, as part of the curriculum, So then, like a child has an option of learning French, German, blah 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 blah, Sanskrit, whatever. This child is then picked up and put in, classical music. Some other child is picked up and put in classical dance. But of course, in Sweden, you talk of classical dance, you're talking of ballet. Here, when you talk of classical dance, there's a whole array of classical dances. So the challenges are much more. But then it depends on which area of the country you live in and how many teachers you can source. But when they do that, by the time the child comes to high school, the child is already proficient in that particular discipline also. In addition to math, science, or whatever else, or humanities, or whatever else the child is learning in school. So this child then throughout high school also has this as not as a vocational training, not as hobby, but as a co-curriculum, not as something outside of the curriculum. Gets evaluated by the experts for that particular discipline also, and gets marks for that particular discipline also. So when the child goes for college admissions, he or she also can put in papers as to what the person is talented or gifted in or has learned. I mean, I'm a theater actor, I'm a theater director, whatever it is, I'm saying. So it's co-curriculum, it's not outside of the curriculum, not a hobby.
Yeah.
So we can try that, is what I'm saying.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for the such a wonderful insight, and we hope that MHRD calls you back and says that okay, you have to lead in the front and to make it more fruitful, the learning and teaching process fruitful in the context of NEP 2020. So I hope that we had a wonderful discussion and a small debate as well, where we were able to share much of our insights to the audience, and we will certainly continue the webinar series. And I believe that we can see the messages by the participants saying that it was a wonderful and fruitful session. So let me conclude, and let us pray that the current context of this pandemic will overcome soon, and we will certainly try to practice whatever we discussed in this session for the past 1.5 hours. Thank you, Pratibha ma'am. Thank you, Bidisha ma'am, and thank you, Devyani ma'am. Minu ma'am, if you have anything to talk, we can conclude. Or okay, okay, you are mute, ma'am.
Why don't you continue, please? Yeah.
Okay. Thanks a lot, the panelists today. And I hope we will again come back with such wonderful insights, so that the vision, the experience, and your innovative ideas we can implement at the primary level, the middle school level, and high school level. And as rightly said, because I belong to a higher education institution, and what rightly pointed in the last concluding remarks by Pratibha ma'am, it is very important that some talent is very important, and it is something beyond the skills. So talent needs to be exposed, talent needs to be utilized properly, and the educators will have to open up horizons in whatever possible way, so that the students are able to understand their talent, their strength and weakness. So thanks a lot. Thank you, Pratibha ma'am, again. Thank you, Devyani ma'am, and thank you, Bidisha ma'am.